Hi, and welcome to this installment of Frank and Mary here in Westborough, the COVID-19 edition. If you haven't seen the show before, my name is Art Bergeron. My day job is I'm an elder law attorney at Myrick O'Connell right here in Westborough. But this isn't about elder law. This is about my friends Frank and Mary. If you've been to one of my presentations, you know that their goal in life is to live in their house until they die and be buried in the backyard. And if that means, if they're in Westborough, that means here. My co-host is Shelby Marshall, whom like everybody seems to know. And the reason why I asked her to be the co-host was because she knows everybody. So she ends up bringing on all these great guests that we feel are of relevance to you. And we've done this as the COVID-19 edition every week for the last couple of months because we realized your world was changing so much that we wanted to kind of keep you up to date. And the world, not only is the world changing, but the town is changing and money is changing. Budgets and things are changing. So Shelby, you've got a great guest to help all of these folks at home living in their house and fearing for all of the bills that they have to talk to them about budgets.
Yeah,
Shelby.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Thrilled to be back on another episode of Frank and Mary. And we have an amazing guest today, our town manager, Kristi Williams. You can see her now. Hi, Kristi. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I asked Kristi to come on our 2 shows ago. We talked about upcoming town meeting. Town meeting is set officially for Saturday, June 20th at 12 o'clock p.m. at the high school. Lots of precautions in place around social distancing and masks and safety and all of that. And all that information is available on our town website. But I asked Kristi to come here to talk to us today, to talk to our audience about kind of the budget. Where are we at? I had given an update at that time 2 weeks ago. There's been new information since then. And really, even maybe equally as important is for an opportunity for folks to hear Kristi. She's done an amazing job during this period. All of the departments have, but wanted to give her an audience to the public so that people could see her, because she's been sort of lurking behind the scenes in Zoom calls and working furiously, but because we've all been...
And by the way, Kristi, Shelby says that about you all the time. This is not the first time.
Lurking.
She's actually been talking so positively about the wonderful things you've been doing, right?
Yeah, but people haven't had a chance to see many of our public officials because buildings have been shut down and such. So anyway, so Kristi, welcome, and let's talk numbers and budgets. So if you would, give us an update on kind of the budget, big picture, and where things stand.
Sure. So as a lot of people are aware, we typically have town meeting in March. So right before the COVID pandemic hit, we were prepared to go to town meeting in March with a budget. The budget at the time was represented a 4.5% increase over the current year's budget, which would be about $457 additional to the average single family. Because of the COVID pandemic, obviously that's had a tremendous impact on our economy. And so some of the revenue that the town was expecting in terms of local receipts, so taxes when hotel and motel meals tax, the excise tax, all the things that we sort of count on and can count on year to year, and we have pretty good information to estimate, we weren't really sure how that was going to happen. And so in the beginning of COVID, and we sort of saw what the state was doing, we took a look at how those receipts might come in differently, and we had to estimate that because the difference between the money that comes in as a revenue and the actual budget is the money that we tax the residents for. So we looked at that, and initially we were estimating that we were actually going to have about $1.3 million less in revenues than we had anticipated in that initial budget. And so I'm really proud to say that we went back to all of the town departments, and we cut budgets. It was difficult certainly, but we were able to cut about $1.3 million out of the budget, which was great. And we did a presentation, and that brought us back to that $457 projected increase on the single family. But then as we sort of watched the pandemic play out and we looked at what reopening might look like and how that was going to continue to impact the economy, and then just as importantly, how it impacts the state budget, because we do receive a significant amount of state aid, we weren't sure how that was going to impact, how the pandemic was also going to impact our state aid. And so the finance director, myself, lots of department heads sat on many different conference calls with their peers and with state legislators and different people at the state level, including the lieutenant governor, trying to understand how we could project those revenues coming in for FY21, and sort of re-looking at that and looking at how the reopening plan might happen. We actually continued to change our projections to about a $3.3 million shortfall, so an additional $2 million. And so again, we went back to all of our departments and we cut budgets again. This time we weren't able to find the additional $2 million, but we did find a significant amount, and we were able to put in place some form of a hiring freeze where we're going to propose to keep some positions open in FY21 that are already vacant. Sort of understanding their scope of responsibility and whether or not we can maintain that through the year. So we were able to, cut additional money out of the budget, and that's every department participated in that. The town, the school, everyone participated and put forward a cut. And so we've gotten to a point where we're about $750,000 from that $3.3 million. And so we're projecting to use some of our reserves to bridge that gap. So that would keep us at that 457 to the average single family, understanding that, as the months go by, we'll start to understand what the economy is looking like. I think a lot of people are going out to eat because people are happy to get out of their houses, and people, certainly the state is opening up hotels and motels as well, so we might start to see more revenue coming in there. And then obviously the state is continuing to work on their budget. We haven't seen numbers, so we're not sure what that will look like, but it certainly is possible that we'll get more state aid than we're projecting. One of the things that's really lingering out there is we don't know what will happen in the fall. I think that we've all heard that, we could have a resurgence in the fall, and that could certainly impact those numbers again. But that's something that we'll just have to be prepared for. I think Westborough is in a really great financial position. We have very healthy reserves, and we've only had to tap into the 750,000 of those reserves. So I think in October, when we have better numbers and a better understanding, we'll be able to reevaluate and potentially change some of those numbers at that town meeting.
Shelby, can I just ask a couple?
Jump in.
Questions from an outlander here, kind of questions from an outsider. So first, this
Kristi,
show.
By the way, you don't have to give away any trade secrets because he lives in that other borough.
First, as you know, this show is kind of designed especially to talk to seniors who, may not be that tech savvy, but they know how to turn on their TV, and so they watch the show. So when you were talking in terms of any of those budget cuts, was there anything that was specifically impacting the senior center or stuff that is kind of geared toward the seniors? Second, kind of conversely, as you're thinking about that over this next year, do you think that there may be any supplemental things that you may be needing to do for seniors? Because as you know, this is the uniquely affected population. I have 13 clients who died. That's because my practice is all seniors. They're the ones who are still kind of really still worried. Now, and then the real trivia question. So you say you've got a lot in reserve. So for the benefit of folks who are thinking, ooh, this is, how much do we really have a lot of reserves? Like, could we still be in trouble? My seniors worry about money a lot, right?
She's sitting on piles of cash right now.
Right. So I guess the question is, could you give folks a sense of how much, if things were really terrible, how much you have in reserves that you could could get you out of a catastrophe? Because it's great that you've got them. I know so many communities who don't. Marlborough does, of course, but I won't. But so it just curious. So, so did the seniors get affected in the budget? Do you think there are any other things that seniors might be, be needing, and kind of how do the reserves, the big picture, how do the reserves look?
Sure. So, because I think Shelby, if she talked to you about the warrant, one of the things that we're doing is we're passing over a lot of articles that are free cash appropriations. And the purpose of that is to sort of hold our reserves so that we can respond in the fall. But we have about $11 million in free cash, and another over $2 million in stabilization.
That's a heartening thought. That's a lot of cash.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we don't typically use free cash for operating expenses. That's certainly something that we try to avoid, but, in understanding, the situation and the uniqueness of the situation, it's something we're absolutely recommending, just to get us back to where we were, at this point. So, so we do have that significant amount of reserves that we're sitting on. In terms of budget cuts to the senior center, one of the things that we did is we were very fortunate to receive a large gift of money to the senior center, specifically for outreach. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're using some of that gift to pay the salaries of some of our a portion of the salaries of some of our outreach workers. So that shouldn't impact services to seniors. Another thing that we looked at in the second round of budget cuts was really training, because a lot of our training and travel, because a lot of our departments were aware that, if they had training and travel coming up in the fall, that those obviously were different now because of COVID. And so we were able to reduce in those areas. I think, Shelby and I both sit on the COVID-19 task force with a lot of really great, town staff, but also community leaders. And that's exactly where we're trying to anticipate what some of the needs are of all the residents. But, very, importantly, our senior center director and Mary Donna, our outreach coordinator, sit on that task force. And we're very, cognizant of the work that they're doing and the needs that they're hearing, and that's specifically what our task force is geared to respond to.
That's great. Thank you.
One of the things we talked about actually on one of our recent task force meetings is, I think some of the needs of our seniors are those that really can't be practically met yet, which are bringing together socially. We can watch all the TV we want and Skype and Zoom and FaceTime, but, being able to get together and have lunch or play bingo or, go and have coffee with Dave and, and go to an outing, those are the things. I know this, personal experience from my mother-in-law. It has really taken a toll. And so I think that's the need that needs to be met. And we've talked a little bit about that, but at the same time, we don't want to risk people's health, right? And encourage them, go against the advisory that is in place and encourage people to come out, because that obviously wouldn't be smart governance either. So
right. And we've tried to get people to simply watch more reruns of our shows. But that really that fad hasn't kicked. We're not up there with Leave It to Beaver yet. We're not.
No. I think it's more Netflix. Right. We need a Netflix channel. That's right. Aiden says he can hook us up. Kristi, can you so going a little further into the budget? So sure. The schools are always an interesting point of conversation when it comes to budgets and the percent that they represent. Can you speak to some of the changes that they've made and decisions they've made with respect to, in particular, the tuition-free kindergarten, which is a big, key item on the warrant, and it was, projected to be a fairly costly one, at least for this first year, as we covered the gap before the state began matching.
Yep. So. I'm just trying to pull up my numbers, specifically with the kindergarten. So we did have an article for $808,000 of our free cash, which we were going to use for the tuition-free kindergarten, because it was going to be a one-time offset, understanding that the state was going to match that amount in FY22. in the Chapter 7, in the funds that we received from the state was going to give us that amount of money to offset the kindergarten. So we were going to use the free cash. And so the school department has worked really hard to sort of leverage some of the savings that they had in this fiscal year. And have been able to actually bring that request down to 0. So it'll be a request to pass over at town meeting. I think it represents a lot of work that the school administration has done, and definitely the high level of cooperation that we certainly have between the town and the school departments, and understanding the situation. And it really just goes to preserving those reserves that we're talking about, the money that we can keep in free cash, understanding that there's some unknowns coming in the fall, that really puts the town in a really good position.
Yeah, and I kind of jumped into that maybe with the assumption that our viewers knew what we were talking about. So Westborough actually was among a handful of communities across the state that still required families who wanted for their child to attend kindergarten full day to pay a tuition. And half-day kindergarten was fully subsidized, if you will, through the tax bill, and paid for. But that really has it creates inequity, right? Because not everyone can afford to pay that tuition. And so the school committee undertook a community subcommittee approach to understanding kind of what it would take, and did the town have an appetite for that? So they brought that proposal forward through their processes, and hence the article that came on the warrant. And highly supportive of it. From my own perspective, I think it's the right way in the town that we have, that all kids should be afforded that. And the beauty of it is that once we put this in place and we have kind of what I refer to as this gap year, then the state actually matches that in their subsidy, whereas before for half-day kindergarten, it was fully paid for through the town's budget. So anyway, good news. Arthur, other questions for Kristi specifically on the budget? Oh, you're on mute.
Well, it's because, so I'm at home, and as you know, I'm in downtown Marlboro, and I thought that the truck traffic would probably not be a good addition to our show, but no, because I know that you would wanted to talk to her about kind of how things are going, kind of more globally.
Yeah. So Kristi, you're in year 2, right? Approaching year 3, right?
Yeah.
Since
becoming interim, yeah. Yep.
Since which sort of felt like you were in it for a full year, right? So what have you learned about yourself during this process, right? COVID sprang up as we were heading into the back half of FY20. You're preparing for, FY21, sort of got your, full sea legs under you, and COVID hits. What have you learned about yourself? And then what have you learned about your departments, and the teams you work with during this?
I think, obviously, I think for everyone, the response to COVID is about an ability to be flexible, because everything's changing. The guidance is constantly changing. The orders from the governor, for a while, were coming out. It felt like daily, and trying to sort of respond to that. And so I think, in this job in general, I think the ability to be flexible and sort of open is really important, and probably never more so than in the pandemic, because what we did was, when the order came out for people to be home, we transitioned staff home, and that's not how we operate. We're a very customer service type of organization, and so it was a whole new world. So, I definitely benefited from, working with my counterparts in other communities, but really benefited from the staff and the department heads. I mean, we were able to really keep up our communication. I'm really proud of the fact that we were able to transition home, and that we never missed a beat in terms of answering the phones and being responsive to residents. And now that we're starting to reopen, we're bringing people back into buildings, and everyone's sort of ready to be back. So, I think, maybe what I learned is something that I'd already experienced, which is that we have a really great staff. But I think that they've really been able to show that in ways that we never would have imagined during this time. And I think everyone's working really hard. It's difficult to not see your staff. It's difficult, personally to, how you sort of deal with it with your family and friends. And so I think that, we're just really proud of the service that we've been able to continue to provide.
And as you said, this has been a great test. This has been a great test, and I think that's, Shelby and I have talked about how, this has been a terrible time for a lot of us, but kind of the silver lining in a lot of places has been people really kind of appreciating the bonds of the people that are around them and the way that you can work as a team, and this whole thing of flexibility. I suppose that's the thing that's been the most stressful for us all, though. It's just constantly going in every day. You like to say you go to work for a challenge, but to go in every day and like, how's the world going to look today? Yeah. That was hard. That's been really hard,
Yeah. Well, and I think when you think about the town as an organization and the diverse type of services it offers to the public. Notarized documents to cemetery maintenance to street maintenance to public safety, schools, building permits. So I'm extremely proud of our town and the departments and everyone to be able to pivot as quickly as they did and sort of as gracefully as they did to come up with solutions that were not only going to work for the department and their teams and their safety, but to continue to provide that level of service. And I think one of the things, and I'd be the first, Kristi will smile at this, probably the first to be the most critical of, is that as a town, I think we're not always as good as we could be when it comes to communications to the public. I think we've recognized that's an area that constantly can be improving. But I think in this event, we did an exceptional job. It was, I think within, I don't remember, I'm going to say a week, we had a COVID dedicated page up on the website with real tangible resources. We've had Kara Presley on, Youth and Family Services Director, and we had the resource list that was not just developed, but it was updated, and then it's been translated into, I think, 4 or 5 different languages. Right. And then we integrated the language word bank, I forget what it's called, for translation services. So, and we, so when people are calling the resource line, which Kristi, got up and running, and the website, they could be connected if translation was an issue, and we were feeding people. So, and we're just like little Westborough, right? But so I think we have, we need to give pause for all the amazing work that's been done and recognize, to Kristi's point, like, we're not really sure what the future holds. So we're waiting on state guidance, right, Kristi? We don't have that number yet, right?
Right.
And do we have an anticipated when we might know?
So I'm hearing that we might get numbers in September. I think they're going to go back to work on the state budget July 15th. And so we'll certainly be watching that closely.
Great. And Kristi, so just as you look ahead to fall town meeting and really the rest of, as we start into FY21, what are you anticipating as the town's kind of biggest kind of, no, maybe not challenges, maybe more like, what are you going to be focused on? Like what are your kind of goals as town manager, obviously overarching for many departments?
Sure. So, there's been a lot of conversation at the state level and the national level about the recovery from this being multi-year. And we don't know, I think once we have a few quarters under our belt, we'll have a better idea of what that really means and how it might affect us going forward. So, certainly as we try to focus on just sort of day-to-day town government and administration, we're really going to be watching the impacts of this and how they might impact us into the future. Because one thing that, I think, Shelby knows is that when we come to October town meeting, we're already starting to plan for our budget for the next year. And so when we're coming in October for the FY21 October town meeting, we're already planning our FY22 budget. And so unlike previous years, I think the October town meeting is going to see a lot more appropriation articles for capital that we've deferred. And I think it's also going to see adjustments to the budget up or down, depending on what the situation is in the fall.
So Shelby, now I have a question for you. So from your perspective, I know so often what we try to do at the end of these shows is, or before we end, I ask you whether there's something kind of what's going on in town. Are there any particular highlights in town? And so I'm asking you that, but I guess I'm also asking you that from your perspective more broadly for the rest of this year. We're going into the summer, we're going into this year. Yep. How are you thinking about that? How are you thinking about how the town can be, or what the town needs to do, given the fact that one of the things that we all understand is that until there's a vaccine, our biggest thing is to just stay nimble.
Right. Well, right.
And
I think we've got to balance looking forward in the future and continuing to progress and improve. As we've talked about, we've invested in a staffing study. It's hundreds of pages long, and it's got some great ideas in it. So I'm looking forward to starting to unravel some of those ideas and dig into them and have discussions with departments. I mean, Kristi obviously will lead those, and we'll have other committees contributing to them. But I'm very interested in that because I think we need to continue to look forward. But again, we need to be nimble enough to sort of not put a stake in the ground and say, well, we need this when I think we've got to give ourselves the benefit of time for the next, 4 to 6 quarters to really think about, what's the long-term impact of this. And we've got a lot of initiatives. I mean, we've got, warrant articles about purchasing open space, so the town needs to continue to, I think, build on its strategic plan and vision. And we can't sort of let COVID stop that, because COVID will be long gone and an interesting memory, and the town of Westborough will continue along with its good work and people. So so I mean it's a really interesting time to be in public service. It's fascinating, actually.
And I think the point about COVID is well taken. I think I may have mentioned to you. I also do a lot of work in Nantucket, and when I go there, you walk by the Whaling Museum right downtown, which has been closed for quite a few months. But in the window, in these big letters, is soon this too will be history. Mm-hmm. And so the notion of saying we're in this strange time that we'll all look back on, probably not fondly, but with a lot of kind of message, knowing that we're kind of living through, our goal is to live through that, while at the same time not losing sight of beyond that. So I think that's an apt summary of all of this. You get great guests, Shelby, consistently. There was this woman named Ella Henderson, though. We're thinking of inviting her next week. So thank you for doing this. Kristi, thanks a million for coming back. Even after you were on the show recently, we actually convinced you to come back. And Shelby, thanks again. This is always a lot of fun. Thanks to our terrific producer, Aidan Horgan, who's always watching us to make sure we don't screw up these shows. And thank you very much, folks, for watching. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next installment of Frank and Mary here in Westborough, the COVID-19 edition. Thank you very much.
Be well.
Thank you.